Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of June of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with Crimea. Today, as a result of explosion, the Russians' railroad ways was damaged on the way from the mainland to Crimea through Crimea Bridge and to the south of Ukraine. As you can see, this is the only railroad ways that goes from the mainland to Crimea, and those railroad ways were destroyed. Local authorities are saying that it will take around from 4 to 8 hours to restore the railroad ways and to restore the passage along these ways. Now we are moving to Kherson. Today we start receiving a lot of updates from this territory. As soon as the water at least start leaving this territory and the level of water has been normalized, the Ukrainians launched massive waves of attacks on the Russian position. They are trying to recapture the lost positions during the flooding situation. For example, as we discussed in the vicinity of Antonov bridge, there are very heavy clashes, and today the Russian sources reported that on the third day or fourth day of those of the clashes on this bank of the river, the Ukrainians have already accumulated around 100 soldiers. If you remember, yesterday we discussed and we talked that the number was around 70 soldiers. A few days ago there were around 50 soldiers, and currently we see that the level is around 100 soldiers. So basically tomorrow there are going to be 125 soldiers. So by the end of the next week there are going to be a real battalion on this bank of the river. I'm waiting when the Ukrainians will start redeploying armored vehicles like tanks and so on. For now they can't do this because of the very bad poor quality of ground, but anyway, and the only place where anybody can use the vehicles is the road from Antonov bridge to the small settlement Oleshki, and currently this road is under Russian control, but time goes, and currently time works in Ukrainian favor, and they have bridgehead. They have a very powerful support of their forces from their side of the river, from this bank of the Ukrainians of Dnipro river. They make artillery support, tank support, their mortar support. They're attacking everything from the Russian side that take a decision to start moving in direction of the bridge. They're attacking everything. There are also a lot of Russian forces, but as we discussed, the Russian forces currently appeared in small operational encirclement, because there is just one way how the Russians can supply and support, and the most important, there is just one way how the Russian can evacuate wounded soldiers, Russian wounded soldiers. Basically the Ukrainians continue advancing, continue developing their bridgehead. The water is leaving this territory, and this gives a significant benefits for the Ukrainians to develop powerful bridgehead. I'm not sure, and I don't know what exactly the Ukrainians are planning to do next after they can push the Russians back. But for example, the Russians are saying that the only thing they can do is to bomb and shell this territory with every type of weapon they have. And for example, today the Russians published the video. The video had very poor quality, so then we got something like a photo. As you can see, this is Antonov bridge, and this is the Ukrainians bridgehead on Ukrainian side on bank of Dnipro river. As you can see, everything is under fire. The Russians don't count their ammo, their shells. This is the only thing they can do, so that's why they try to do this perfectly. They attack everything, and they try to burn the Ukrainians' bridgehead exactly in the vicinity of Ukrainian side of Antonov bridge, and not to allow the Ukrainians to send more reserves from their side of the river to this side of the river. We'll see how this story is going to be finished, but today, as I understand, this is not the only place where the Ukrainians start advancing. Also, the Ukrainians start crossing Dnipro river a little bit to the south in this area, and today the Russians also published the video how they were bombing and shelling the possible Ukrainian positions on this side of the river. As you can see, the water has left. On this video we see a few boats that were heading in this direction. So basically the Ukrainians started capturing the islands between the banks of Dnipro river, and probably these are not just two places where they're going to do this. They will try to capture every single island. They will try to accumulate as much as possible forces on these islands, and after that, by these actions, they will be able to reduce the distance between Russian positions and Ukrainian positions, and then it's going to be just a question of quantity and number of boats that Ukrainians have, and if they have enough of number of boats, like 1,000 or even more, they will be able to make a very powerful marine operation, and they will be able to land their forces on the Russian bank of Dnipro River. So basically we see another points of pressure from the Ukrainian side, and the only thing that the Russians can do is to attack and bomb this territory with artillery, and to be more precise, with TOS flamethrower systems. I believe there are going to be a lot of clashes for all these islands, and I expect activation from the Ukrainians on this side, in the middle between these 2 points as well. And of course we are going to see a real intensifying of actions on the southern, let's say, islands between Golaya Pristan and Kyzhyomys and Kherson as well. So there are going to be very fierce battles for these islands. These positions, the Ukrainians and the Russians either were forced to leave these islands during the flooding, but now they can return, and currently we see that Ukrainians have a better and bigger speed in comparison with the Russians. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings in the vicinity of Kherson, as a result of artillery duels, the Ukrainians lost 30 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system, Akatsiya. Now we are moving further. We're going to the Zaporizhia area. Today we got also a lot of updates, at least from the Ukrainian side. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians continue bombing and shelling and attacking every single place of the Russian forces. During the previous week, they managed to find and discover the main Russian positions, the positions that the Russians use to send reserves and so on. And for example, today there was a very heavy explosion in the vicinity of Primorsk, and this is the road. This settlement is located on the road between Berdyansk and Melitopol that the Russians used to send reserves. Furthermore, today the Ukrainian sources published the video of usage of HIMARS missiles. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians were attacking using the HIMARS the forest, and the forest on the north of like Melitopol, in the vicinity of Tokmak. And basically, as you can see, there is like a lot of villages on these fields, and it's very difficult to accumulate a lot of forces in villages, and for few reasons. The first one is that there are a lot of locals who support the Ukrainians, and they will always provide information about the Russians in this or that building, and the Russians found the only solution how to hide a lot of forces is to use forest. First of all, it's very difficult to get inside the forest with locals, because all those forests are restricted areas. And this is the area where the Russians have the reserves, and these forests are located very close to the first combat line. And using these forests, for example, the Russians were sending the reserves, for example, from Chervonogorovka to, let's say, Robotnye. From this forest, like the passage was Chervonogorovka, Solotka Balka, Ilchinkova, Novopokrovka, Robotnye, and we know that there are very heavy clashes in the vicinity of Robotnye. The Ukrainians managed to discover Russian positions, and currently they're bombing and shelling. So we see that Ukrainians started or already about to finish the preparation before the next offensive operation in direction of on the south of Orekhov, on the Bradley Square. The Russians reported that as a result of like fightings in the vicinity of Robotnye, they managed to discover and to destroy another Ukrainian commandos platoon that was working in this area. Exactly somewhere at 8 p.m. of the local time, the Ukrainians launched another attempt to attack Russian positions in the vicinity of Robotnye. For now, we haven't received any updates about the results. As usually, the Ukrainians use the forces of 47th Mechanized Brigade and of probably of 118th or 65th Mechanized Brigade. We haven't received any updates about any activity from Mala Takmachka in direction of Verbova, so we will keep these forces on their line. So we see that, as we discussed a few days ago, the Ukrainians were planning to complete the preparation before the next wave of attack somewhere on the 27th, 28th of June, and now we see that Ukrainians are starting doing this. this. We know that the summit, NATO summit, is going to take place very soon. The Ukrainians, they don't have much time to show some results, and currently they are working on a result, and no matter the losses, they will provide a result they can. When talking about Petykhatki, the Russians reported that there are no activity from the Ukrainian side, just their continued accumulation of their forces in the forest lines, in the Lapkova, in the northern farms of Petykhatki, but without any attempts to attack Russian positions. Petykhatki itself are located in the gray zone. The Russians controls the hills on the south. The Russians controls the hills settlement like Zherebyanki itself. So they are there on the south and they're waiting for the Ukrainians. And when talking about this situation, the time works in Russian favor because currently they can restore positions, bring more manpower to mine the fields and to prepare another defense line, but to stop the Ukrainians during the upcoming counteroffensive from their sides. Now we are moving to the Avdiivka tactical bridgehead. Today we haven't received any updates. As soon as the Ukrainians establish control over Rovnopol by the force of 31st Mechanized Brigade, probably they made a small operational pause. They are making some changes, making new tactics, new strategy, and I believe that first we're going to see the attempt of the Ukrainian side to attack on Bradley Square, and after that they will restore their activity in the vicinity of Urozhaina, Staromayorsk, Piryutine. And currently, as I understand, the main goal of the Ukrainians is to establish control from Liman of Piryutine, because the clashes for this settlement started a very long time ago, almost the same time with the clashes for Rovnopol. We see that the Rovnopol has already fallen, and now it's turn from the Ukrainian side to activate their attacks in this direction. So we'll see. From the Russian side, we got the another footage of work of their helicopters that were, and this video came to us from Avdiivka tactical bridgehead. On this video, we see how the Russians were destroying another armored vehicles that were tried to hide somewhere along the forest lines. You see the missiles were launched, and there is a white spot in the central of this video is armored vehicles, and on these seconds we see how the Russians destroyed that armored vehicles, a very big explosion. So the Russians continue attacking the Ukrainians using helicopters, a very effective type of weapon against the Ukrainians' armored vehicles, and by the 27th of June we still haven't received any updates from the Ukrainian side that they have managed to shut down at least one Russian helicopter. The Russians reported that the total losses of the Ukrainians on Zaporizhia and South Donetsk front line was around 115 soldiers, 8 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. As we can see, the level of losses have been reduced since in comparison with the first days from 4th of June till 10th of June, but anyway the level of losses is still very high. When talking about very interesting updates, and I'll give you my opinion about the situation in Ugledar. Today the Ukrainians published another video how they were bombing and shelling some office, some building on the north of Nikolskaya. This is Nikolska. They were bombing these big buildings. This is the only big building in this part of that settlement. Probably that was this is Russian fortification, and the Ukrainians tried to destroy the most powerful fortification exactly on this part. Also, the Ukrainians were bombing some settlements a little bit to the west of that. And the thing is that the Russians stopped publishing any videos of bombing and shelling of Ugledar. If you remember, during the January and February, we got a lot of updates, a lot of usage of guided bombs against this settlement. We saw that the Russians were using flamethrower systems when they were attacking this settlement. But currently, we see complete reduce of any activity of the Russians against this city. And this is a very big question for me, because to tell the truth, I don't understand what exactly is happening there. There are few explanations. The first one, either the Russians are trying to reduce the Ukrainians attention to this settlement, or the second option is that the Russians basically don't have weapon to support the normal level of attacks against these settlements. Anyway, the first option means that when time comes, the Russians anyway will launch their offensive operation towards the city and will try to capture this. And the second one, if there is the second option is correct, that means that the Russians do have some problems with munitions, with artillery systems, and basically they try to accumulate as much as possible on Vremivka tactical bridgehead, on Bradley Square, probably in the vicinity of Petykhatki. Currently, we see that Ukrainians have opened another front line in Kherson, and of course we see that the only possible solution for the Russians is to bomb this territory, the Ukrainian bank, with artillery. So that means that they were forced to send more machines to this front line. So very interesting, and the question is how many reserves and how many machines, artillery systems still the Russians have. Now we are going to Avdiivka. The Russians reported that during the previous day they were mainly bombing and shelling Avdiivka itself. They destroyed the ammo depot of 110th Brigade, they destroyed command center of the same brigade, and also the Russians published the video how they were bombing and shelling the Avdiivka itself, and probably those were exactly the video of those attacks. As you can see, this is a very big city, a very big industrial zone with a lot of trees, a lot of buildings, very big, massive residential area. So, and we still see that the Russians are not making any attempts to conquer this settlement, and the question is when are they going to do this? Probably maybe not even in this year. With this speed and with these activities from the Russian side on the front lines. Now we're moving further. We are going to talk a little bit about Artyomovsk. The Ukrainians, after they managed to develop a little bit their bridgehead using the force of 3rd Assault Brigade along the channel between Kordyumovka and Klishchevka. As I understand, they took a small operational pause. We haven't received any video, photo, any confirmation of any activities. Probably currently they're trying to prepare another plan how to conquer the trenches and fortifications on the Russian side. The Russians haven't made any attempts to counterattack. Currently they prepare the 2nd, 3rd, 4th defense line, and they are ready to meet the Ukrainians. The Russians reported that the total losses of the Ukrainians on Donetsk front line were around 325 soldiers. As you can see, the level of losses still very high, and 9 armored vehicles, and mainly those the clashes was in the vicinity of Avdiivka and in the vicinity of Artyomovsk when the Russians were trying to defend their positions. Now we are moving to Liman front line. We got a lot of updates, and the Russians published another video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions between Sporny and the gas station. If you remember, a few months ago we got update that the Russians captured this part of Sporny agglomeration, the small village, and that they ended already Sporny, but currently we see that maybe the Ukrainians were able to push the Russians back or something like this, but we see that currently this village Sporny is under Ukrainian control and the gas station is under Russian control. Furthermore, the Russians reported they attacked and destroyed the communication node of 110th Mountain Assault Brigade. This brigade is completely redeployed between settlements Razdolovka, Veselaya, Vyimka, Ivanodarivka and Sporny, and this brigade is located on this bridgehead probably since maybe July of the last year, so around a year they're defending this territory, and I must say that this is one of the most effective brigades from the Ukrainian side, who's very effective in defense. I see that Ukrainians and Ukrainian commanders are not using this brigade anywhere else, because when talking about other types of brigade, we see that the Ukrainians are moving the brigades from one position to another position, and there are few brigades, Ukrainian brigades, that hold their positions, that stays on their positions for a very long time, and that we see that Ukrainians commanders are not even redeploying them anywhere else. And I'm talking about, for example, 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, and the second brigade that came to my mind is 72nd Mechanized Brigade in the vicinity of Ugledar, and probably 110th Brigade in Avdiivka. These are like 3 brigades that the Russians still couldn't penetrate, destroy, or crack this net. And now we're moving further to the Kreminna forest. The Russians reported that they bombed and attacked Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Serebryanka, in the vicinity of Chervona Dibrova, and in the vicinity of Chervona Popovka. The Russians were bombing the positions of 63rd and 67th Mechanized Brigades. Furthermore, the Russians reported they discovered and destroyed 2 commandos platoons in the vicinity of Dnipro. The Russians reported that the total losses of the Ukrainians on the Liman front line were around 100 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles and 4 artillery systems. As you can see, the level is big in comparison with, let's say, a month ago, but anyway not so big in comparison with Donetsk. We see there are still no active clashes, but as I understand that probably Liman is going to be the next hot point. And the thing is that if we compare, for example, Liman front line with Zaporizhia front line, we see that the Ukrainians haven't able to achieve any success on Orekhov front line, the Zaporizhia front line, and the main reason of that is the mine assets that the Russians have, the mine fields. I believe you saw the recent video that was published in the open source, the failed attempt of 47th Mechanized Brigade to attack to the south. I will not publish this video during this stream, because it was a terrible video when the Ukrainians landed on some ground, were trying to attack. There was like a platoon of 12 soldiers or something like this, and during the first seconds 10 of them was damaged by mines. They lost their legs, arms and so on, and the platoon, without any active clashes, were forced to evacuate the entire squad using the Bradleys and so on. So this is very difficult to attack to the south because of mines everywhere. And when talking about the Liman front line, the Russians are advancing in this area, trying to attack. So that means if one army wants to attack, the first thing this army does is this army demine their own minefield, because you need to attack using fields, using forests, using all different types of roads, and of course, first of all, you want to secure your own army from your own mines. And Ukrainians understand that if Russians attacks on Liman, that means that they have demined their own minefields. And the same situation from the Ukrainian side. Currently, they also have accumulated their attack fist with one purpose: to attack the Russians in direction of Kreminna. And this purpose forced the Ukrainians to demine their own mines. So basically, when talking about this front line, about Liman front line, we see that both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, are preparing themselves for an upcoming offensive operation from both sides, and this situation forced them to demine their own mines, and this is unique situation. And this is probably the first situation during the special military operation when both sides understand clearly that if you want to achieve a success, if you want to achieve significant success and to break the entire situation in this special military operation, you need to attack or to counter-attack exactly in the area where your enemy is going to attack, because this is the only way how to bypass the minefields and just how not to enter any minefields. So anyways, I understand we're going to see a lot of fierce fightings exactly on this bridgehead, exactly according to the reasons I just described to you. Now we are moving to Kupyansk front line. The Ukrainians published another video how they destroyed the Russian positions in the settlement, in the village by the name of Zherelne. The Ukrainians are saying that was a center or some bridge, not the bridge, center or building that the Russians were using for coordinating and attacking the Ukrainian positions using drones. So another drone center was destroyed by the Ukrainians in the vicinity of Zherelne. The total losses of the Ukrainians on the Kupyansk front line were around 30 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, 1 artillery system, and 1 radar INT-PQ-36. Very interesting updates are coming from Kharkiv, from Sumy region. The Russians reported they destroyed the ammo depot of 60th Mechanized Brigade in this small village Ogurtsovo that located right in front of Novotavlazhanka, right in front of Belgrade region. But we are going to move currently to Sumy region, and today, for example, the Turkish sources reported that they've seen and they published the photo of the first usage, of the test usage of new Russian drone by the name of Охотник. If you translate it in English, it sounds like hunter. So this is Russian invisible drone. This is Russian invisible drone who can carry a lot of different type of weapon. This is first of all a drone. It's Охотник, and basically later we got another video of that Охотник. So this is how this drone looks like, this hunter. So as you can see, this is a very powerful weapon. The Russians, as we understand, have already completed its tests, and currently they have completed not just tests but the real military usage on the territory of Ukraine. So we expect that this year the Russians will start the massive production of this type of weapon, and probably and maybe this is going to be a game changer, because when talking about this type of weapon, they're completely invisible. First of all, maybe they are invisible for the Patriots, probably, and of course you don't need to have like pilots. You can control this drone using the let's call it like signal or something like this, and this can be a game changer, at least in the military campaign of 2024, the next year. Currently we continue receiving updates about Prigozhin and his adventure in Belarus. Today the president of Belarus, he gave his own vision of the situation with Prigozhin, with Russia. He described the entire process of negotiation process. He talked a lot. He gave us a lot of updates, and basically he told us that Wagners will be redeployed on the territory of Belarus. Wagners will gave the armored vehicles to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. Probably they will keep something. And also the president of Belarus talked about the nuclear weapon, and he told that Wagners are not going to protect and secure the nuclear weapon. The nuclear weapon will be protected by the Russian forces and by the forces of Russian Federation. And currently we still don't know the real purpose of Wagners on the territory of Belarus. The Lukashenko told us that maybe they will try to get experience from Wagner forces, from their commanders among the forces and officers of Belarus. So we'll see. Anyway, they have some purposes. They're going to use Wagner resource, but the question is how the Belarus are going to use the Wagner resource. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.